Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are looking at another devblog, and it's for the FJ-4B Fury. Now when I saw this thing on the dev server in the American tree, I've got to be honest, I didn't really know a lot about its history or where it came from. As you may know, I'm much more of a prop head than a jet head, and therefore I did some reading on it. It seems to be a modification of the F-86 Sabre, which was designed to be much more naval-based, and to also carry larger loadouts when it comes to secondary armaments, as we would see them in game. So it was seen as much more of a multi-role aircraft, with the idea that it would be able to engage enemies in flight, but also be able to engage enemies on the ground with secondary armaments. And after reading about it, it was pretty successful in what it needed to do. It entered service in 1956, and where does the FJ-4 come in? Well, the FJ-4 seems to be the last main produced model of this, or the mass-produced model that they talk about, and the idea behind it was to try and eventually go past stuff like the other F-86s and be a replacement. Unfortunately, it didn't work out just like that, since we had other planes that were created, such as the Super Sabre, which pretty much took its place instead, and then we go on to other jets, making the normal Sabre superfluous. So, overall, it's an interesting addition to the game. It fits in the time period that they put themselves in. I believe we were discussing on the dev server the latest aircraft that we have in terms of time, or the most modern one, is the Italian aircraft, the G91. But with the FJ-4, it comes way before that. I mean, this plane was phased out in the 60s to be replaced by other machines of its ilk, which were just better. Now, what we'll do is we'll go through the article and also talk about my experiences with it on the dev server and its implications moving forward. So, the FJ-4B will become available to all fans of jet aviation with War Thunder's upcoming update 1.79 as a new addition to the top rank of the American aviation research tree. At first glance, when compared to the numerous modifications of the F-86 already in War Thunder, the FJ-4B doesn't appear to be much different than its older brethren. The FJ-4B may be armed with a great variety of bombs, 5.250s, 5.500s, 2.1000s, and 114 Hydron 70 unguided rockets. It also has 4 20mm as offensive weaponry, which are good both against aircraft and lightly armored ground vehicles. Unlike other Sabres, however, the FJ-4B is equipped with one of the most powerful jet engines ever installed on any given Sabre modification, the Wright J65W16A, producing 7,700 pounds per lbf, I'll just say, because otherwise I'll get shouted at, approximately 3,492 kgf, or 34 kilonewtons. The J65 engine is capable of pushing the FJ-4B up to speeds of 680 miles per hour, or 1,095 at sea level. Although some later variants of the F-86 can frequently surpass the top speed of the FJ-4B, the additional thrust from the engine wasn't meant to boost its top speed, but rather compensates for the additional weight of the secondary armaments with which the aircraft would often be outfitted with. So, as you can see, my cat is playing with a towel, so I apologize for that. When we look at this machine, the way we should look at it is as a multi-purpose plane. So it is described as a jet fighter which can also annihilate stuff on the ground, and that's the way I see it. I see it as a plane which is going to be strong in air realistic at 9.0. When I tested it, it seemed to handle pretty well, at least compared to other contemporaries that I've seen at 9.0. And at the same time, the speed of it means that it can keep up with a lot of jets which have been seen as speed demons. The Hunter F1, the Votor Mark II-A or B, whichever the one has the 30s on it. This machine will be able to keep up with them and be able to stick with them, meaning that they can't just run away from your classical Sabre. On top of it, some people commented that it wasn't an ugly aircraft. I have to disagree. This to me is an ugly duckling, just like the Super Sabre. The front of it just looks like a goldfish, so I apologize if I've offended anybody. When it comes to the bomb loads, I picked up the My dev server footage, I still have it on my computer, so I had a look at it. So as you can see, 1090. With the Hydra rockets, they have 290 millimeters of pen, but they don't have a lot of explosive mass. So they have 0.9 kilograms there, or 1.18. So this, to me, seems like they are AP rockets in themselves, which is completely fine. It means that they will be able to, well, not AP rockets, but you know what I mean. They're not bang-bang rockets. They're not like HVARs. They're much more like AP rockets that you find from the British. So with that said, 290 millimeters of penetration, you're going to be penetrating pretty much anything you come up against at 9.0. This is going to be a vehicle that's going to be used in rank 6 of ground vehicles, and 6 250s may not be that good. 6 500s is good enough. 2 1000s and 2 2000s is great. If they drop independently, that's even better, but unfortunately I don't think they do. But if you get 114 Hydra 70 rockets, you have plenty of rockets you can miss, and overall you can still be able to kill targets. It's also the same on something like the IL-28SH with its 190 odd rockets. If you miss a few, that's alright. What you can do is eventually you will hit one, and if it's a target like an AA, then you'll be able to do a lot of damage to it. When I was looking at the new radar AA, one of the things that I kept saying to people that were saying it was overpowered is just wait. You will need this. If you want rank 6 jets, if you want even further jets when it comes to, how nations developed, what you'll find is a lot of jets got a lot faster, but at the same time, there was a bigger focus on secondary weapons. And the reason for this is multi-purpose roles. So if you look at the Abrams right now, the Abrams is an MBT. It is also designed to do a lot more than what the Sherman was designed to do back in its heyday, and even back then you had light, medium, heavy tanks. Right now, if we look at nations, you only have the MBT, and the MBT is designed to do all of the jobs that stuff like light tanks, medium tanks, and heavy tanks are supposed to do. The same happened with aircraft. There was a streamlined nature, which we can see from the British, the Americans, the Soviets, and also the Germans with regards to their aircraft. It became very much obvious that you needed one side an absolutely massive bomber, which could drop anything on a nation flat in it, and then you needed a jet, which would also have ground striking capabilities. Now, there are some aircraft out there which do break the trend. The Warthog is one of them, also the Su-25. But the majority of aircraft nowadays, and also even going back to the 60s and 70s, were designed with this multi-purpose idea, and it looks like the FJ-4B is one of those aircraft. So that means in air realistic, it's going to be incredibly useful against some of the aircraft that it's going to see at 9.0. And in ground realistic, it's going to be incredibly useful. Also, with the addition of aircraft like this, one of the things that I've thought intently about is the issue with spawn points. So one of the things we saw, and still see, with P-47s, P-51s, even Wyverns, is people taking out quick, light vehicles which don't cost a lot of spawn points into ground realistic, and driving to the point and being able to capture it, maybe get a few hits, but then get killed and spawn into a plane in the first minute or two of the match, especially on a map like Abandoned Factory, for example. It's incredibly easy to do. Let's say you spawn in an AMX 1390 or an AMX 13, you drive to the north point, you capture it because you're quite fast, then you die after scouting a bit, then a minute later you can get in your AD4 and you can use all of the Hydras that are on that thing. Well, the FJ-4B is that, but taken to a larger level. So there's two ways of addressing this, and it is going to be a problem that's coming to the game. We saw it with the AD4. The AD4 is still a menace, but now we're getting the F4U7 for the French. We're also getting the FJ-4B for the Americans, and we're going to get also the IL-28SH for the Soviets. So we're now starting to get other nations to have the similar firepower that something like an AD4 can give you, and even more on top of that. And once people figure out how to fire these rockets, even though they've got quite a high velocity, and also they don't drop that much, or at least on the dev server, after about a kilometer they didn't drop at all. I was overshooting everything, but after maybe 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers, they started to drop, showing that these are going to be accurate rockets if they're used well. But anyway, back to the point. We're going to have multiple nations now which have insane secondary armament loads, and unless either the meta changes where people start taking in SPAA first, like a few people per match, but obviously you can't control that. You may get half a team of SPAA, or you may get a team of no SPAA at the start of a battle. Or, the other side of the coin is you put a limit on aircraft somehow. Now, there have been a few ways I've personally proposed. I do think it is an issue and should be solved, and one of them is time limit. So, in the first 5 minutes of a match, you cannot get into an aircraft if you die. You either have to wait for the 5-minute mark to get into an aircraft, or you have to get into another tank after you die. This would stop people running at the caps and capping them to try and get into aircraft early. And if they still want to do that, then they at least have to wait a little bit in order for your team to either get some AAs or to get some planes themselves at the 5-minute mark to be able to get into the battle and face them. That's the way that I would personally do it. The other way is just limiting the amount of aircraft in the air to either 1 or 2 at a time. The issue with doing that is it doesn't solve the quickness issue, which is the biggest problem for me when looking at high tier and even rank 3 and 4 with some of the crazy machines we have. But yeah, they're taking the idea of CAS and exploding it massively. Something we're also going to have to see, which I haven't seen a lot of people comment on, is in Air Realistic, if you look at the models of stuff like the medium tanks, the heavy tanks, and the pillboxes running around, they normally get one shot if something hits them. And the reason for this is because of the way that they're modeled. If something hits them and penetrates, they die. Now, whether we're going to see new damage models for these things, what we did see when the dev server dropped is there was a lot of assault guns which were put into the tank folder for the in the game files. So maybe they're trying to boot up AI to give them a proper damage model, but if they don't get a proper damage model, machines like this will end the match within 2 or 3 minutes, especially if you're on something like Korea, which is one which you'll see a lot. So yeah, that is definitely something to think about in Air Realistic, and also something to think about in Ground Realistic. Just be happy that in Ground Realistic you have those radar-guided AA, which can maybe keep you alive. You also have the Chieftain Marksman as an addition. Every nation now has a top-tier AA radar machine, and the reason for them is things like this, and things like the IL-28. In Air Realistic, I think that is a problem that a lot of people haven't thought about. We already have the issue with AD4s doing it, but if we have half teams of this and they're doing the same thing because they want to grind it out, what are you going to do? It's also armed with 420mm. The 20mm for me seemed exactly the same as the ones on the last Sabre. The difference is they seem to actually cool down or stay cool, I should say, longer. So that is something which is important for this machine, meaning that its time in the air, if we go back to this, it has 576 rounds, and if they don't overheat that quickly, which they didn't on the dev server, that basically means that it will be able to be combat effective for longer and be able to stay in the air for longer, which is incredibly important. When I test flew it, I thought the acceleration of it was not great, but then again, I'm not a jet pilot, as I said before. Speaking of secondary armaments, being a fighter bomber, the FJ-4B can carry a vast and varied amount of ordnance options, ranging from bombs to unguided rockets. Depending on the loadouts, the FJ-4B can be equipped with bomb calibers ranging from 250 pounds to 2,000, or if you're the type that likes rockets more, even up to 4 rocket pods and 19 projectiles each. Additionally, 4 20mm nose-mounted cannons can be used to engage hostile aerial threats or lightly armored ground targets. So, good night AA. Although the Fury can hold its own when used as a fighter aircraft, the machine will truly shine when used in its designated role in ground attack in top-tier combined battles, for example. Offering impressive ordnance options combined with high top speeds and superb agility, the FJ-4B is bound to become a new fan favorite close air support machine of the top ranks. It's going to be a menace, I think, at least the first few weeks, just like the AD4 was, and then what they'll do is they'll tamper with the rocket accuracy, or they'll change the amount of damage that bombs do. But if there is a second dev server, I will make sure to test out the rockets on it, because what we found, we tested the IL-28 rockets, the SH, and when I actually got around to hitting, I was doing a decent amount of damage, but it wasn't anything crazy, like setting fires, knocking tracks, maybe killing a guy. And that is the thing about these AP rockets. You are not going to pen a tank and one-shot it. So that is at least something to think about. Is this going to be good, though? Yes, I think this is going to be great. A lot of people overlook the F3D because of how high its BR was, but now it's reduced BR. It's not too bad. And the FJ-4B is coming after the F3D. So you can use the F3D to grind this thing if you feel like it. And I think it might be a worthwhile go. It would be nice to see more F3Ds around. It's not a terrible aircraft. It's just a little bit lumbering at its BR. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a lovely day.